July 26, 2018. A wildfire in Northern California is about to build a tornado out of its own fire. 143 miles an hour. 18,000 feet tall. A column of spinning fire wide enough to swallow 3 football fields. Moving directly toward a city of 90,000 people.
Oh my God! Oh my gosh!
The National Weather Service had never issued a warning for anything like it. The firefighters on the ground had never trained for it, and no scientist had ever documented one inside the United States before. This is the story of the first fire tornado in American history and the people who were standing beneath it when it came down. But to understand how a wildfire builds a tornado, you have to go back 3 days. Because what happened in Redding was not just a wildfire, it was the exact set of conditions needed to create something no one had ever seen.
Multi-agency team trying to better understand the incredible winds that surrounded and drove the Carr Fire, causing widespread damage even in areas where the fire itself did not burn.
The region sits in the northern Sacramento Valley, wedged between mountain ranges on both sides. In spring, cool, moist air rolls in off the Pacific. But by July, that picture changes completely. As that same air spills down the eastern slopes, it loses its moisture. And what reaches the valley floor is hot, dry air that acts like a furnace, pulling the water out of the soil. By midsummer, the hills around Redding are covered in dry grass and brittle chaparral. It is, in every sense of the word, a powder keg. And the summer of 2018 was worse than most. A prolonged drought had gripped Northern California for years, and a brief wet stretch afterward had done something cruel. It had encouraged dense new vegetation to grow, and then baked all of it dry. There was more fuel on the ground than there had been in years. A record-breaking heat wave pushed temperatures past 110 degrees for days on end. On July 26th itself, the thermometer in Redding hit 113. The air was so hot and so dry, it was already doing half the fire's work before a single flame existed. All it needed was a spark. It came on the afternoon of July 23rd. A vehicle towing a travel trailer was moving along State Route 299 near Carr Powerhouse Road, west of Redding, out by Whiskeytown Lake. One of the trailer's tires blew out. The bare steel rim dropped to the pavement and dragged, and the sparks it threw landed in the dry grass at the edge of the road. It caught almost instantly. That is how the Carr Fire began, and no one who watched it start could have imagined what it would become. For the first 2 days, it behaved like a typical California wildfire. It crept uphill through steep terrain and dense forest west of the city, and crews cut containment lines and tried to hold it away from populated areas. The terrain was difficult, but the fire was not yet a monster. Then, on the night of July 25th, it lunged. It broke through the lines and pushed toward the small, historic town of French Gulch. And more than 60 homes there turned to ash before crews could do anything but pull people out.
The fire was that intense. The heat was that intense.
But the worst was still a day away. On the afternoon of July 26th, a powerful weather system to the north began pushing strong winds south across the region, and those winds did not just fan the fire. They changed what it was. By roughly 5:30 in the evening, the Carr Fire crossed a line that almost no one on the ground recognized in the moment. It stopped being a fire driven by fuel and terrain, and became a fire driven by wind, where the wind itself is the engine. It is one of the most dangerous states a wildfire can enter, and it had already happened before anyone could react. The fire exploded eastward and downhill, racing toward the western edge of Redding. It jumped the Sacramento River, the last natural barrier anyone had been counting on. Evacuation orders went out to tens of thousands of residents, and firefighters were now simply trying to keep pace with something that was outrunning them.
This is crazy. I'm crazy. It's already jumped the river. There's a reservoir right there. Okay, it's on the reservoir side. I'm out of it.
For the people in its path, none of the science mattered anymore. Families found their neighborhoods wiped out. Some parents told their children to pray. Many made it out with minutes to spare, leaving behind everything, even their documents, because there was no time to grab anything at all.
I'd never seen anything like this. It just went any direction it wanted to.
But above the fire, something else was beginning that very few people on Earth had ever witnessed. As the Carr Fire hit its peak intensity that evening, it was releasing an enormous amount of heat straight up into the atmosphere. That heat drove towering columns of smoke and superheated gas skyward. Around 7:20 p.m., those columns punched through a stable layer of air above them and burst into the upper atmosphere. In just 15 minutes, the plume doubled in height, and it rose to roughly 39,000 feet, higher than a cruising airliner. At approximately 7:30 p.m., it touched down. At its base, it measured close to 1,000 feet across. It reached an estimated 18,000 feet into the sky. The winds inside were clocked at roughly 143 miles an hour, the equivalent of an EF3 tornado, strong enough to level a house to its foundation. And the temperature inside the vortex reached an estimated 2,700 degrees, roughly the melting point of steel. It was the strongest tornado of any kind ever recorded in the history of California, and only the second true fire tornado ever documented anywhere in the world, after one observed during the Canberra bushfires in Australia in 2003. What it left behind looked nothing like fire damage and everything like the aftermath of a violent storm. Trees were stripped of their bark and snapped off. Soil ripped from the earth exactly as it is beneath the most violent conventional tornadoes. Massive steel electrical transmission towers, engineered to withstand extreme loads, buckled and collapsed. A steel pipe was found wrapped around a tree. Homes the flames had never even reached were destroyed. Everything was gone. To make it worse, there were people caught inside it. Bulldozer operators working to cut fire lines were suddenly engulfed as the vortex swept over them, the windows of their cabs shattering all at once under the pressure, while rocks and burning debris hammered the metal.
What's your emergency?
I'm in a dozer on Buenaventura up by Lake Avenue. All the windows got blown out. I got my curtains down. I don't know if you guys behind me are alive. I can't last too long here.
Okay, if you can get out safely, get out, okay?
I can't. You know, I have to have a ride out of here. It's all on fire around us. Can I give you my wife's phone number? Tell her I love her.
He survived, blinded by shattered glass, certain he was going to die. He stayed on the line and asked the dispatcher to call his wife. And when the tornado finally moved on and crews reached the charred skeleton of his machine, they opened the cab and found him alive. One of the very few human beings to sit in the heart of a fire tornado and walk out of it. Less than a mile away, another man had already made his last radio call. Jeremy Stoke was 37 years old, a fire inspector and 17-year veteran of the Reading Fire Department. When the Carr Fire ignited, Jeremy had been on vacation. He cut it short and volunteered to come back. On the evening of July 26th, he was not on the fire line at all. He was driving through neighborhoods in his pickup, going door to door, making sure people had gotten out. At 7:39 p.m., with the fire tornado bearing down on him, he radioed a mayday. He gave his location and asked for a water drop. He said he was getting burned over. That was the last call from him. The winds picked up his vehicle. Jeremy Stoke did not survive. He was the first firefighter in documented history to be killed by a fire tornado, and his final act was driving toward the danger to make sure his neighbors had made it out. And in a quiet residential neighborhood on the edge of the fire's path, the tornado was sweeping over homes that had nothing to do with any fire line. Ed Bledsoe had left earlier that day, but his 70-year-old wife Melody was still at home with their two young great-grandchildren, 5-year-old James and 4-year-old Emily. As it closed in, the phone rang. It was the children.
I was talking to my little grandson on the phone. He's saying, "Grandpa, please, you got to come and help us. The fire's at the back door." I said, "I'm right by you, honey. Just hold on. Grandpa's coming."
It was a promise he could not keep. He was stuck at a police cordon, unable to reach them. Melody covered the children with wet blankets and tried to make her own body a shield. But there was no chance. Rescuers would later find all 3 of them together beneath the rubble of the home. The fire tornado directly claimed 4 lives that evening. Jeremy Stoke and the 3 of them, all within a single stretch of the fire, barely a few miles long. That same night, 81-year-old Don Ray Smith, a private bulldozer operator, was overrun by the fire while cutting a line to buy time for the evacuation, and he did not survive either. By 8 p.m., the fire tornado had dissipated. It had been on the ground for roughly 30 minutes, but the Carr Fire itself burned on for another 5 weeks. It was not fully contained until August 30th. By then, entire neighborhoods of Reading were simply gone, along with much of the historic town of French Gulch and nearly all of the community of Keswick. In total, the Carr Fire killed 8 people, destroyed more than 1,600 structures, burned 229,000 acres, and caused over $1.5 billion in damage. Jeremy Stoke's name is now written into wildfire training materials across California, and the way agencies think about the danger to people who are nowhere near a fire line was permanently changed by what happened that night, because the conditions that built it are not gone. They return every summer, and they are getting worse. Firefighters know how to fight fire, and they know how to read the wind. Before July 26, 2018, almost no one believed a wildfire could build a tornado of its own. After Reading, it became something crews across the American West now plan for, train for, and watch the sky for every fire season, because now they know it can happen. And the next time it does, the people beneath it may not get a warning either. If you made it this far, thank you for being here. These stories take time to research, write, and edit. And every view, like, and comment helps. Make sure to subscribe.